Welcome to Renaissance Charge Videos. I'm Rick Friedrich, and today I'm going to continue something that I talked about a couple of years ago on earth shelters, and in this case umbrella greenhouses, which is a new thing that I just came up with. So before I get into that, I want to mention that I'm going to have one more meeting at the end of July in Elkhart, Indiana. This will be probably my last public meeting ever, because of the Great Reset that's coming in January, and no doubt the destruction of the country in the fall. So that's a big subject. Most of you don't understand that or won't be able to hear that message. So I did have a message previous on that subject, and I have a whole lot more information on it now. So I don't think I'll be able to have meetings after that. I think in the new world, I'm not going to be part of this smart world anymore. So I'll be going offline and off smartphones or anything. So this will be an important meeting, the last one that I'll do. Now I may be applying these things in my local area, and that's kind of my focus. So you don't want to be around any population centers, any groups of people when this all happens. I'm beyond trying to tell people about this because it's too late to do anything about it. People, if they don't already know what's going on and make serious decisions, then there's nothing I can do to help you. So I'm not going to waste time on that. For those who are going to do something, here's some information that will be very helpful to you. That's why I'm doing it. And I will have some more videos on the motors shortly for those who are waiting for that information. So we're going to look at, we've talked about the earth shelter concept in a video that I did quite a while ago, and while the core idea has remained the same for me, which has been developing over 16 years, I have a couple more little things that I've learned in the meantime. So for those who haven't watched the video, I'll put this up in the final edit of this video. The concept is a total solution. It doesn't have to be completely applied where you have a structure that won't be damaged from hurricanes, tornadoes, earthquakes, forest fires, or internal fires, or flooding. And you don't need heating and cooling for it either. And that's the ideal model, and you can modify accordingly. So we'll talk about that later, because this video I'm going to start off with applying the same principles to an in-ground greenhouse. So we'll show you this picture, top and bottom, top down looking and side angle. So what we have is, so I was looking at some of the videos online of greenhouses. Now what's important about a greenhouse is that you want to be able to grow your food all year round. With this concept you could actually grow tropical fruit and food in the middle of winter in northern climates. So northern states, even in Canada. Not northern Canada per se, we'll see about that. I have friends who are at the very north where it gets minus 70 degrees. So that is a tall order to try and just live there anyway. So what we're looking at is, there's this old man in Nebraska, some of you might know those videos, where he was doing that. But he was relying heavily on geothermal. He was an in-ground greenhouse with geothermal. And so at first I noticed that he wasn't, but he had all these tubes running out like 200 some odd feet out into the field or areas outside the greenhouse, and then these tubes underneath the floor, so basically circulating cool air from one side and bringing it up through the ground and having warm air. So he was digging 8 feet deep, 200 feet out there with all these tubes underneath there, a big ordeal. So I'm thinking, no, we don't have to do that. So if he had put the umbrella effect, now the umbrella effect isn't the earth. The umbrella is actual water barrier. So like a regular umbrella that is in the earth. Now there'll be a difference. I'll go over an application in the far south where it's really, really hot. We'll have to do something different there. I'll talk about that in a minute. But for the rest of us who have cold winters, this is for you. So really, instead of him going 8 feet down to get it warm enough to do it, what you can do is have these tubes maybe at most 2 feet deep. And so then you make an umbrella on top of the pipe, but with earth in between it. So in other words, say you go down a foot, you dig a trench that's 2 feet deep and a couple feet wide, instead of digging all the way 8 feet deep, if you want the geothermal. And then you put the pipe down and you put whatever you want to do around it, some rocks and whatever, and soil in it and around it. And then you put an umbrella, which would have to be on an angle. So the water, so then you put the earth back on top. The water goes down and doesn't go through the umbrella, it goes off to the side and then down further. So the idea is the further out you go, the more area is going to remain 55 degrees all year round. So really you have to figure out how deep you go to how wide you go with that umbrella. So then what happens is everything underneath that umbrella stays that same temperature. And so what you have is not just water insulation, but a little layer of foam or whatever as well. And I did this, as I mentioned in that previous video, 16 years ago, around maybe 15, I'm not sure the exact year I did it. And my basement was leaking, Michigan basement. It was leaking. It was like a 200-year-old house with stones. And so what I did is that on the surface, so say this is the side of the house, and I dug 2 feet down, 4 feet out. So not just 2 feet down all the way, but starting from the top, angling down 4 feet and 2 feet deep. Pull that earth away, put those foam sheets that you have on the side of your house, and then put plastic over or rubber, and make that plastic rubber go off the end of the insulation, and however far out further the better. And then put the earth back in, pat it down, and then the water will come down, and it will then not go further than the plastic. So you can put tiles down there if you wanted to, whatever you want to do. And so when I did that, I had a dry basement and it was warmer. So I applied the same principle on the other side of the house when I built 2 more rooms, and I put the earth right up against the side of the house. Very strong walls, 8-inch walls, and it made a huge difference. Anyway, so I verified this out, and we're doing this locally here with some of my friends to do this greenhouse concept. So what happens is anything that gets wet in the fall becomes part of your freezing of the earth. So you're basically, the moisture in the earth, gets frozen over time as the temperature gets lower, and you've got like the ground being like a block of ice, right? The lower you go, the less so, because you have the heat from the earth. And so you have a frost line down to so much depending on where you are, how cold it gets, whatever, rain, and all those factors. But underneath that insulation, it stays 55 degrees all year round. So in the summertime, when you're doing this concept, you'll have a cooler ground to help with the greenhouse and the hot temperatures from the sun coming in there. So that's important. And secondly, in the wintertime, more importantly, that you have 55-degree temperatures on the walls, not just on the ground. So what these guys were doing in Nebraska and elsewhere I've seen was they would put this hole in the ground, dig out this hole in the ground, and then rely quite a bit on geothermal underneath the ground, spend all this money doing that, and of course they were doing it professionally and they were making money off of it, providing food for the town. I'm trying to give you the bare bones here for survival. This is a very important concept. This is one of the best things I could tell you about, because food is the top priority. Security is going to be a big issue when there's a civil war going on, because without security, you don't have your food. And I'm not one for taking arms against my brother. I'm not quite a pacifist, but I'm essentially one. And I diffuse the situation rather than resort to violence. But what I'm saying to people is get out, away from it all while you can. You have a couple of weeks to do that before it becomes very difficult to even travel between states and buying and selling of things. So anyway, these guys who did these greenhouses in ground, they're having these 6-inch insulation, foam insulation around the walls, because naturally the walls are cold. They're exposed to the elements. The rain goes down, and like I said, so if they applied this umbrella greenhouse effect to the walls, or to around the perimeter, like I show, then what happens is you have warm walls instead of having to insulate from the walls. See, the insulation is only as good as the temperature that's already in there to hold that temperature in. It's still going to be, the other side of that is going to be a freezer, or at least a refrigerator temperature on the other side of the wall. So, you know, why not have it warm all year round or cool in the summertime? So this is a very easy and affordable thing to do. But what I recommend, I got to get over to my friend's house before he digs up any more of the ground, because what I recommend is doing the outside first before you dig in the pit. Do the outside first, so that way if you have the pit already dug out and you try and do this, you may compromise the walls by pushing the dirt in, and then you'd have to rely on a framing system there to hold everything in more. If you've got nice clay ground already and you do this outside perimeter first, and maybe you leave one side, like preferably this is in the side of a hill, so that you could walk in sideways into the greenhouse. But you could make a little hatch to make it really affordable and just go into it, climb down a ladder and whatever. Or you could build some steps going down, and then you'd have to put some kind of roof over top of that so the rain wouldn't go down in puddle in there. But you have a couple options to do that, to deal with water. You could have water run off and go deep into the ground, or whatever you want to do. I'm trying to make this as simple as possible. So say you left this side and you use a skid loader to dig out the earth later on. So first of all, if you do all this and you compact that earth back down, then when you dig out this, it's not like the earth is going to fall in as easily. And then you can just frame it up as much as you need to, some basic framing, and it should pretty well hold, because it's not going to get wet. That's the thing. So you can make some frames, and then so the side view of it, what you would want to do is your north wall, for those of you up here in the northern hemisphere, the northern wall, you make a really small steel frame, whatever is necessary to hold the roof up. And you're going to have plants hanging from different things. So you can put a truss or whatever, and you could also do a raised, the guy in Nebraska does that. He has a raised, with his kit, a raised bed at the front where the sun comes in, and then you could kind of frame that up a little bit and then put some boards across from the back wall, and just here and there, and you can kind of dodge some boards. Whatever you want to do. I'm just trying to say do this affordably. If you have any metal that's exposed, you'd want to coat that, because you're going to get water building up on that. And guys mentioned that as I looked at some videos. So what you want is a light frame holding your polycarbonate instead of glass, and you want an angle, so maybe depending on how long it is, maybe you're about 8 feet above the floor on the back end, and maybe 6 feet or maybe a little bit less on the front, whatever you want to do. And you can do this concept as a doghouse model to experiment with, or just do it on the side. Make a earth umbrella effect all around the perimeter again, and then just have it in ground. And or if you didn't do that, you could have a freezer out there, whatever you want to do. So now if you want to add geothermal to this, you can run your tubes below from one side to the other. In this case, I have it going from front to back, which really you'd have it side to side if you have more of a rectangle, so say this is front, this is back, and then this is your side to side. You'd have your geothermal, so you're tubing underneath the ground, and then support it so it doesn't get crushed at the right. I mean, I saw a guy spend $25,000, $30,000 on all the stones and everything, and I think that was a big waste of money. It was way overkill. I mean, are you going to have tractors, weights down there, or are you walking on it? I mean, you can understand the same thing with a drain field, right? So I don't drive over my drain fields on the properties that I live at, because that could compromise it. But I can walk over, I can use a rider lawnmower, or whatever. And so in the same way you could do that here. But again, you don't really have to depend so much on geothermal, because you have the walls and the ground that are staying warm. And so you could at least do up here in Michigan, Indiana areas, you could easily do fall crops growing all winter long, as well as the winter. You may be able to get some summer stuff too, depending on how warm it is in there, how much sun you have, really. And then you can hold the heat, you can heat up with water, that you can heat water up, like you could put 55-gallon barrels or whatever in this earth right here, and have them heat up with solar collectors or whatever. Like you have tubes running across your roof in your house, you can do this. I have friends that have done that years ago, and you can collect the warm water while the sun is out and use it. So you could circulate that and heat up water, and then have that water release the heat throughout the night. Lots of different options. What I'm trying to do is just go over the bare point that's different from all the other stuff that people are talking about. So this is a very important thing to do, because it's affordable. So get your chickens so that you have eggs all the time, and get your earth shelter, and you're good to go. And of course, in the meantime, store stuff up for this next year, because we're going to see more and more lockdowns, and things are going to get real crazy beyond your imagination, beyond my imagination. I can't even wrap my brain around it. Again, go to the World Economic Forum and look at the Great Reset. I've downloaded 267 topics, and you can see what the new world is going to be like. And notice that type into any mainstream media, the Great Reset, and you're not going to find anything. You'll find very little even on Google mentioning it. And yet this is the biggest event, the biggest announcement, and the biggest news in 500 years. This is like saying, hey, by the way, we're going to have a reformation here, and we're going to change the whole world, everything about the world. So it's unbelievable. There's only a few of us who have even mentioned this thing, and even those who are mentioning it don't really get how severe this is going to be. So going back to the other Earth shelter concept, I mentioned the main concept of the umbrella effect is it's not the Earth that's the umbrella, right? It's the actual insulation from the water that's the umbrella. So in this case, say you have a steel frame house where you have like a ramp going up below your, like it'll start lower than the your flooring. You're not dealing with basements here because you're already like in a basement, but not in a damp basement. So you have this ramp that goes up, and whatever slope that you want, whatever you want to do, optional. And then whatever, you could coat it, you could put stuffing on it, whatever. It's not my point to get into those kind of details here. And so maybe you have a foot or two of earth on top of that. And so you have a steel structure that's solid. If you want to drive a car up on it, you have to make it strong enough. If you just want to garden on it, then you don't have to be spending so much money on the framing. So now you go, like I said, maybe 2 feet, depending on how much thermal or how much earth you're going to have on the side of your house, and how big your house is, and how cold it gets outside, all that factors. So maybe at least a foot, but maybe 2 feet of earth. And you can see this inferior model here, where they would have to rely on a lot of earth, a lot of weight on top of that house, which is not practical. Plus they're not getting any sunlight really in that house. This earth shelter, where it's open, you have more sunlight than almost any other house that you've ever seen. So anyway, what happens is you have a layer of insulation and maybe a layer of rubber, or you could have strong plastic or whatever's going to hold up. And then you could put tiles in there, depending on how steep your slope is. You don't want erosion to take place. As the rainwater comes down into the ground, it needs to go somewhere. It could erode that whole earth off of there, and you're having to deal with that. So instead, if you have some tile structure where the rainwater goes in and then it has a place to go down the tile, and you can do all sorts of things with that. You can have all sorts of stuff that the dirt can't penetrate through, just the water, membranes or whatever. So then you say have a good foot of earth on top of that, and then you could have grass on the top, or you could have a garden on top of there, and whatever. Now I did that many years ago on the side of my house, and so I went all the way up to the roof. I had to step 1 foot onto the roof. So I went up a full-size room, which actually went lower. So I had a pretty big slope there on the side of the house, and I framed it strong enough where I could drive my rider lawnmower up on there and not have a problem. And so I could cut the grass, because I made it grass. So anyway, so you frame it strong enough, you could collect water at the bottom of that, and then filter it, whatever. And then you could use that for whatever purpose. You always need water. And of course, they're making it illegal to collect water in some places. I don't understand that concept. That doesn't make any sense. So anyway, you're above the ground so that if there was ever flooding, it wouldn't come into your house. That's the first thing I always consider in getting a property, is what's the flood situation? What would be a flash flood? What would happen here? Right? So you want to be kind of above ground. This is not your typical earth. It's not an in-ground situation. It's kind of a cave concept. So now, you could have open window. So you could do the same concept on 3 walls. So you could do the same thing with the other 2 sides of your house, and have sloping going down the other way here and there, and then frame it up. However, and this is where if you could do these compressed earth blocks like I've talked about, and my customer David Cagle deals with that. He's got all that figured out, including renting those machines or whatever. So there's a lot of different earth block concepts, but he was talking about 2 foot wide, 18 and a half or 18 inches, 2 foot wide. And what this does is it still allows the house to breathe, but it holds the thermal in. And then you have lime paint, earth compressed floors, so you're grounded on the ground. And in your home, instead of having wood floors or whatever, you could have that. And you have lime paint in which won't mold. So you don't have a mold issue at all. They filled up these homes full of water for a significant period of time, drained it out, and they found no molding taking place with the lime paint. So this is ancient modern technology, no digital necessary. Digital, you want to get rid of the digital world. Reset. Let's cancel the digital world. Cancel that culture, or lack of. So anyway, you have your rooms that you want the most light in up the front of the house, the bathrooms, storage rooms, kitchen, whatever other rooms at the back. But the back room still could get light. So the idea is having this high up, you could have a second floor up here, or a loft, or just a high ceiling for the front rooms. And then you can allow the light to get in through to the back rooms, or you could have skylights back there too. So you have more light in this situation than in a normal house. So these are going to be wider houses than deeper. And so you could have a back door in the middle of that too. You could have skylights going through there. You could have ventilation going through. Whatever. This all can be done. Now, the front would be maybe some framing, some earth blocks on the base, whatever, and then you have mostly windows. Now, what I've added to this concept, like the guy in Nebraska that he did that with his house some almost 50 years ago, he had a greenhouse in the front. Now he had it more covered. So say you have the right angle. That I was just talking to a guy in Kansas, a customer, and I was saying, down there where you have a lot of tornadoes, you'd want to make that angle whatever it needs to be for the tornado to just ride over it. And that's what happens with tornadoes. They don't rip up the ground. So if you're trapped with a tornado and you can't escape a tornado, then go into a ditch and it'll pass right over you. It doesn't suck you up into the tornado. It kind of, like if you hit the tornado sideways, then it will suck you into it. But at the bottom, it's just kind of riding above the ground. So in this way, it passes right over the house, just like a hill, because that's what it is. So on the other side, if you just had the window there, you'd have an issue. So you could have some like shutters that could be used when you needed to, if you were afraid that your windows might get damaged. Maybe you got hailstones coming whatever. Do whatever it needs to be done. You could also have a bunch of earth piled up on a hill in front of your house. So if the tornado was coming this way, it would go essentially right over your house. So I've thought about this. And a forest fire again would do the same thing. It wouldn't damage your house. It would go around it, so forth. So, and it wouldn't damage the structure of your house. I'm not sure about smoke and all that, what happens in that context, but you just have to think it through. If you're in an area where it can have forest fires, then you want to think about those things. So anyway, earthquake, this is going to be a solid structure. Hurricanes, floodings, winds, whatever. It will meet the challenge. And then again, it will not need heating and cooling throughout the year. And I know I've been in earth shelters where they're only partial. I remember in my first house I went to get wood because I had a wood burner that I put in. And there was a guy who was picking up 1 load of wood for the whole year. And it wasn't even a full face cord, or a full cord of wood. Somewhere between a face cord and a cord. And I said, that's all you get? That's all you're using for the whole year? He said, yeah, my house is in ground and whatever. Well, I've been in homes where in the middle of winter, below freezing, we went in there, and after a while they put in a little log that was a couple inches thick, like a stick, and after a little bit of time we're opening up the windows. And that house, just like mine was only partially done this way, the whole back of the house was earth. I mean, like there was a wall and all that, but the earth went all the way up to the peak. And then the sides were covered partially, kind of went down from there, so maybe part of the walls were exposed. And that house, they told me, and I experienced it, it needed very little to keep warm. And I'm talking about like 70-degree warm. So if you got 55 degrees to work with that, it's no big deal. A little bit of cooking, your body heat pretty much does it. It's a lot easier to go from 55 degrees up than to go from 0 Fahrenheit. So again, the key advantage to this is the umbrella effect. It's not the earth in itself, because the earth has to be insulated. It's a fundamental difference between any other system as far as I've seen. So, now before I forget, the other thing about this, talking about for those of you down in southern Texas and Mexico or wherever else, you're not really worried about cold winters or the rain. You're actually going to have to use the rain to cool off the ground in the summertime. So what you probably want to do is have more of a reflective element to reflect the sunlight on the very surface of the ground, and then or you could put it just slightly underground to hold it all in place. And then you want to do a larger area, because what's happening is the ground is heating up over the summer, getting warmer and warmer over time, and the days get hotter, of course, too, into August or wherever. Maybe different in some places, I don't know. But so what happens is you want to create a larger area that is an umbrella. In this case, it's an umbrella from the sun and the heat. And then as you go farther away, you have more area under the ground that is not influenced by the outer areas that are not covered and conducting heat into the ground. What's good about the ground is that it doesn't transfer the heat very fast. So what happens is you have a good bit of heat or cooling effect from the lower areas of the ground, and keeping the whole area closer to 55 degrees. It'll probably be hotter than that there. And then you can build buildings with this concept. And I know if you go into a lot of different places, there's more or less systems that are somewhat using this effect, but it's basic engineering when you think about it, basic physics, and you just have to use the ground to your advantage as much as possible. So if you can do this, you can build up the ground and not have to go deep into the ground, and then you could use water and all sorts of different thermal transfer systems. But that's the basic idea of the umbrella effect, and you can get into all the other things that other people are mentioning as well. But my point in this is to bring up that point. So then, there's not much else here that I want to mention. Yeah, so again, while this is a total solution concept, you can still have similar advantages with a regular roof and build-up of earth with the umbrella on 3 sides of the walls with sufficient support. If the umbrella is done the same way as shown, then the earth will still provide similar stable temperatures for the buildings as I found my first home. So you can do more or less these concepts with great advantage. So you don't have to do the whole thing. But you can try and build something really small and see how it works. I mean, there's not really time to experiment anymore. What you're going to do, you got to think of yourself in emergency mode. You have to really you have to figure out who are the people you're going to be with when all this goes down. It's just actually not going to go down all at once. It's going to pick up pace until the fall, and that's when it's going to really hit. And who knows what other surprises are coming our way. Just when I think, we've got it figured out, then suddenly more surprises show up, and the timeline actually moves up than what I think it's going to be. So find the people that you're going to be around, strategize with them, get all the fundamentals of life where you can completely take care of yourself for the next year, and then some. Get off the beaten path, do what you can, look at the states that you're planning to do that in, and figure out the best you can if it's going to work out there or not, because you've got things that become mandatory that force you to do certain things. So there's going to be a whole lot of states that people are moving out at the last minute, and guess what? When you go to sell your property, when things are in the fall, you won't be able to transfer the deeds, do all that, because everything's closed down, like we saw the last few months, well, the last first half of the year. So think about what you're going to do, make your decisions, come to grip with it psychologically, spiritually. It takes a lot to grasp what is coming and come to grips with that we're not going back. Okay, those of you call yourself conservative and all for Trump, Trump is not conservative. Trump is part of the Great Reset. Most of the conservatives are. The people in the top industry, the big players, are all part of this global reset, Great Reset. And they're playing you right now. They're playing political theater, and it's going to be too late. All these people are going to get duped and left high and dry in the end. And then people are going to panic and try and do something, and it's kind of too late at that point. So I'm done trying to help people come to that realization. It's too late for them. If they have any reservation, there's nothing I can do. So I'm just pointing out some practical things here. The next video we'll do is on the 4-pole. I'll have a couple of new things on the 4-pole. Some of you are waiting for those kits, and I'm going to go through thorough explanations of that. So we'll see, if I do any more videos, it's going to be on the real fundamentals. And my meeting I'll repeat the same meeting I had in May. For those of you who couldn't come, that is August 28th, 29th. It's on my r-charge.com website. Right on the front page, you can see it. Click the link, and we will go over what we did before, and I'll go over some of these fundamentals. I'll have lots of handouts, and we'll get down to the nitty-gritties, because we might have to bump up that timeline sooner if things get worse around here, and we maybe have to have it somewhere else. I'm going to be prepared for that. So we'll see what happens. So thanks for watching.